A new beginning, heard daily on Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, can you get a good deal from buying a car from a rental company? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money radio show. Actually, the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Today in the studio, as he is every Friday. I don't know why I keep forgetting that, Tony Joe. Just slips my mind.
Listen, it's no big deal, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I did have your mic turned up. But anyway, Tony Joe's with us as he is every Friday to take your Car Corner questions. The number to call is 1-877-913-5357. Would love to hear from you today, whatever is on your mind, as long as it has to deal with cars. We don't want to ask Tony Joe questions that might get us in trouble. 1-877-913-5357. Okay, so I know a lot about you, Tony Joe.
Really?
Well, I've known you for a very long time. Consider you one of my closest of friends.
Okay.
So there's two things that I'm going to two gifts I'm going to give you today. Okay. There's two things that I know that you love. You love predicting and forecasting the weather. It's kind of an amateur hobby, and I'll have to say the one time on the air that you predicted snow and ice was years ago, but nobody believed you, and sure enough, there was snow and ice. I'll give you that credit. So let's start with the first.
Or it could have been just dumb luck.
Yeah, a lot of that. Let's start with the weather. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing? Because I know that I go throughout the day. Because I'm always fascinated by it. I check it and see if it's changed and that kind of thing. What do you think the weather's going to do?
Well, I think it's going to get very, very cold starting, not on Sunday, but starting tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon is when it's really going to start filtering some of that cold air, and it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be really, really cold from what we're used to. And then on Sunday, it's going to stay cold. It's going to be cold. Well, that's easy to say that because that's what everybody's forecasting. But I really believe we're going to get some, not a lot, but we're going to get some freezing rain, which bothers me in this way, Bob, and a lot of people don't always understand. If you get like 1/10 of an inch of ice on the power lines, that can be bad. But if you get more than that, like we're supposed to get probably 1/3 to 1/2 an inch. The thing that bothers me about that is not the driving conditions on the roads, but the fact that it builds up on tree limbs. Tree limbs break, fall on power lines. Power goes out, it's cold, you got no electricity. That's the thing that I see as a majority problem than icy roads. And I do believe at the end of it all, by Monday night, we're probably going to have some snow flurries just to top it off.
Right.
So
and everything will melt back and refreeze, and
well, it will stay cold.
Oh no,
Tuesday,
actually, probably won't melt.
Right. It'll stay cold through. I think they're saying Wednesday, but I have no way to. They've got access to weather balloon data every 6 hours, and I don't. I can only look. There's no big secret. I just look at the weather radar all the time, and I study the patterns, how they're coming across. And I will say this, in case I'm right. We got wave after wave coming off the coast of Japan. You can see another wave, another wave, another wave. So depending on how long it stays cold, you may have another round of this. So I don't, it depends on the timing of the events. And, I can only wild guess at it. I can't really determine anything. I wouldn't want to go up against Pete Delkus or anything, but you know,
watch it.
I will. No. I mean, I will say that I think we're going to get probably some freezing rain out of this at the very least.
Right.
And that brings us to a whole plethora of problems with cars and everything else.
I can't remember this, but back in 2021, we had the great ice storm that was just absolutely horrible. From what I remember, they weren't even remotely predicting that, were they?
Yeah, they were. They were predicting snow.
Well, yeah, but I mean, not to the extent that it.
See, here is the little secret about Texas that I've discovered. Okay, this is my own personal observation. I grew up in upstate New York, way up near Canada, and it was cold all the time. And, I was used to it. I grew up in it, and it was just like daily. I mean, we scraped our windshields from, right after Labor Day sometimes until May. So it's easier for the people that are used to it to predict cold weather. Down here in Texas, where we live, we don't get a lot of ice and snow, and it's a little harder for our weather guys, who are good guys, but it's a little more of a challenge to predict accurately things like this because they're not used to it. So I will stick up for the weather guys and say that, and I just think that it's really hard to predict anyway because storms and fronts speed up and slow down, and cold fronts speed up and slow down, and the timing is off. And if it's just right, and you get enough cold air with enough moisture, you get snow.
Well, and you also to factor in that we're talking what most people miss when they watch a weather forecast. The probabilities mean a lot. A percentage probability of something happening is much different than it's going to happen.
Right. Then that's it's easy for a weather guy just to say 50% chance of rain or not, and he still gets paid on Friday. And you can't say he was wrong.
1-877-913-5357. Okay, now my second gift to you today. See, if anybody were to
by the way, was that a gift?
Yeah, to give you an
opportunity. Putting me on the spot like that?
Of course.
That's where you, sir.
That's where you do your best work. So the second thing is, if they could see in the Prudent Money studio here, on the mic, you have, and I have no idea where you stole this from. I don't even want to know. But you have an ESPN, a collar on the mic to make it. In fact, you even had someone take a picture of you so you could send it to your buddies to tell them you're on ESPN. So I want to get one real quick. This is not the invitation to give an elaborate explanation. Who do you pick on Sunday between the Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers?
You know the answer to that. I can even tell you the score. It's going to be Cowboys 30, Green Bay 14.
30-14.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what's the big deal about that? That's easy to.
Well, all I know is you're going to be way out of control, much like this entire city if they go to the Super Bowl.
I was around 92, 93, and 95 when they had the Super Bowl, and the thing was crazy. The parade, a lot of people weren't around then, don't know, but the parade was crazy. It got out of hand. There was a shooting. They were storming the floats, endangering the lives of the players because they were trying to climb on the floats, and there was a lot of uncivilized behavior. Let me put it that way.
1-877-913-5357, and that's all I got for you, Tony
This isn't
Joe.
Philadelphia,
They're probably going, when are they going to stop talking about non-important things and talk about cars? Well, let's talk about cars. And I found this article so very interesting, and you came in, I said, did you hear about what Hertz is going to do? And you were all over it. We started talking about it. But Hertz is selling about 20,000 electric vehicles from its fleet, including many Tesla Model S sedans, and they're trying to balance out their supply and demand. So
Excuse me for 1 second. I just want to make this point.
Sure.
They're eliminating all EVs from their fleet.
Oh, they're eliminating.
All right. That you say selling 20,000, you might think they have 40 and they're getting rid of half of them. No, they're eliminating EVs from their fleet.
So, just looking at the article, I was looking at some of the pricing of that these Teslas were going for, and they had mileage kind of all over the map. Mostly high mileage, mostly 75, 80,000 miles, which will...
With a lease car, that's expected.
Right. So we can talk a little bit about that. But I got it. It makes me wonder, do we really have enough data on how many miles a Tesla can go? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because you don't really talk about the longevity of one.
And another thing that we don't know, and that is they're just now hitting the market as used vehicles. So, what is a used Tesla S worth with, say, 80,000 miles on it? Well, I would not know right off the top of my head. But I would say this. Well, now, how about the battery? Because that's the first thing I would wonder about. That's the biggest
issue.
What about the battery? And if I'm going to pay X amount of dollars for the car and have to pay $20,000 for a battery, you've got to factor that in.
Well, I looked that up, and it said, I love these answers. They'll go 300 to 500,000 miles. Well, is it 300 or is it 400? Is it 500? Is it 600? They don't really know. That sounds like a big guess to me.
It's interesting about a battery. Even it's a lithium-ion battery. It's huge. But how you use the power in a battery, that is to say how it's discharged and recharged, have a dramatic effect on its life expectancy.
Right.
If I were to take a car battery and run it dead every single day and charge it up every single night, that battery wouldn't last.
That's so true.
It wouldn't last very long at all. But if you use it properly, as we try to tell people about alternators and things, don't make sure the alternator is charging the battery. Don't wait for the battery to go dead and make the alternator work too hard and all that.
1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Hi, this is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Marriage and money can be a toxic combination. The best way to avoid arguments over money is to practice this principle: show grace unless you are perfect. We all make financial mistakes. Treat your spouse with grace and love versus making them wrong and yourself right. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, the home of the modern-day steward movement. Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. What does that say about when I turn the mic down on myself and forget to turn it back up? Number to call, 1-877-913-5357. Do have a line open. Okay, so you were talking about, and I didn't think about this. That's interesting when you talk about you're going to take a battery, you're going to use it all up, drain it all the way down, and then charge it all the way back up just to do it again. And that makes me wonder, how do you build a battery like that? I mean, that's a lot of...
Yeah, now let me just explain something so that kind of you can understand my thinking behind it, because this is just my own personal opinion on things. So I do know this, that when you run a battery down and recharge it, and run it down and recharge it, and run it down and recharge it, Bob. The solution is battery acid, but the plates are made of material that will give up electrons to make electricity flow inside the electrolytic solution, which we call battery acid. And that's how you end up depleting. It's just a natural occurrence. You deplete the plating material, and after a while, the battery is no good. So think about this. The way it works in an automobile is in a gasoline-powered car. Now, we're talking about a 12-volt battery. You start the car in the morning, and it takes a little bit of power from the battery to run the starter motor and start the car. Once the car is started, a belt-driven alternator provides electricity to put back into the battery to recharge the battery. So the alternator is not designed to charge a battery. It's really designed to keep a good battery fully charged. When I say good battery, I mean a battery where you take a little bit of power from it to start the vehicle. You want to put that power or energy back into the battery. You want to replenish it. And you do that on a constant day-to-day basis over and over, and that battery lasts years because you're taking a little bit of power from it and you're putting it back. And using the electrical system on the car does take some power from the battery, but the alternator is constantly replenishing it. So, having that in mind, let's look at a car, say a Tesla, that somebody drives, or any electric car. It doesn't have to be a Tesla. If it's plug-in, the person runs it down to 20%, 10% maybe, and then they get it charged up. And this may be a decision they have. This is not a decision, but this is a routine they go through simply because of convenience. They drive it to work, they drive it home, they drive it to work, and then it runs down to a certain amount and they charge it back up. Well, eventually that battery is not going to last as long as one who takes the car out and comes back to recharge it and replenish it, whether it needs it or not. It's always going to need some because obviously you drove it, but keeping it fully charged is going to extend the life and life expectancy of that battery far beyond the other classic example I gave you of a busy person who just drives and runs it down and then charges it back up when they have time.
You see, now I would think, and I was going to ask you this, I would think that you would run you would hurt the longevity of the battery if you came home and there was only 0.25% used and you filled it up. You never let it drain all the way down, but you're saying it gets kind of opposite from that.
The thing is, a lithium-ion battery is far different than a wet cell, 12-volt dry cell automotive battery, okay? So there's a lot of differences between the two, major differences. But they use the same concept in charging and discharging. So it probably wouldn't happen as fast with a lithium-ion battery, but it would happen over time. And when you deplete the battery and the material, then that battery is no longer going to be any good, and you can't, shorter and shorter trips, and pretty soon you can't go anywhere with it. You're going to have to replace the battery. So my question is, how do I know that battery, what kind of life expectancy does that have in it if I'm going to buy this car? What can I expect?
Because the prices are very, very, very low. I mean, when you start thinking about what you have to spend to get a new car or a pre-owned car today, and the reason we bring up the battery, because that is I can't pinpoint exactly what the cost is, because I've heard a lot of different amounts throughout the years, but it's an expensive replacement. I mean, like $7 or $8 grand is one I kind of consistently hear.
Just to bring up this point, it has not directly to do what we're talking about, but, a hybrid. Now, we're talking about, like a Tesla, is a plug-in. You take a hybrid, which has a gas engine that can also run on an electric motor. It doesn't have a transmission. It uses an electric motor to drive the vehicle itself, and it can recharge while you're driving. So that is a step up, in my opinion, in technology. A hybrid would be a step up in that respect about how long a battery life would go. I would think a hybrid battery would last a lot longer than a plug-in. You see, it's charging. You don't have to plug in a hybrid. There are some that you can, but you got to realize there's the gasoline automotive engine, then there's the hybrid, which is a gas engine and a generator, then there's the complete plug-in, which is completely run on a battery.
So tell me this, and this may sound like a crazy question, but if you take a car like a Tesla, how many parts are regular, the same parts you would see on a gasoline car?
Well, you're still going to have suspension and brakes and things like that you have to contend with. I'm not, I'll be honest, I've never worked on a Tesla. I don't work on electric cars, so I don't know, haven't seen them up close and personal, but I do know that certain things on the car still have to be maintained. So I would say that, there's similarities. The basic propulsion system is completely different.
I guess the point, and you may not know the answer
still got
to
to
this,
have tires and
is
things
when
like that.
When you get 75, 85, 100,000 miles on these cars, do you think they'll be more expensive to maintain or less expensive, or tough to tell?
I would guess they'd be more expensive.
More
simply
expensive.
Because Tesla is a brand of its own, and it's not out there in great supplies out there. Bob, the thing is supply and demand, and if you're manufacturing a lot of parts, generally the price goes down. Tesla, is kind of on its own, and there's not as many of them as there would be Chevy pickups. So my guess is it would be more expensive to maintain.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the weather. We've got about 3 minutes left, and talk about what not to do when you get a covering of ice outside, and you think, no big deal, and you go to scrape the ice off the car, kind of get in the car, warm it up. So talk a little bit about what not to do.
Here's something that I just want to go over, because if we do get a little freezing rain over the weekend or next week, Monday, you got a little glaze of ice, and you come out. Now, if you're not able to park in the garage, then you're going to have ice on the windshield, ice on the doors, ice on the windows, and, basically all over the car. Now, one of the things that costs a lot of money that people do not knowing, so I'm trying to give this information out, do not grab your plastic door handle, because it won't open. Don't try to break through the ice and then open it, because if you force it, you're going to break it. It is now made of plastic, and they can be costly to replace. So you want to be careful, and what I generally advise people to do is just kind of take the end of your hand, make a fist, and use the end of your hand to just kind of lightly break the ice. If it's not that hard, it's not 2 inches thick, you can just break the ice with your hand before you pull that door handle. And be careful when you pull the door handle, because the ice around the door itself may keep you from pulling the door open. You open the handle and it still won't open. Why? Just use your head. Just tap around the outside of that door and kind of break that ice loose so that the door will open. Once you do get the door open, you got to realize that if you start the car up and you turn on the defroster right away, it will blow air onto the windshield. You don't want to pour hot water on the windshield. You don't want to try to do anything to melt it. What will melt it would be if you'll get in the car and start it up, put on the defroster, and as the water in the cooling system warms up, the defroster will start to slowly blow warm air and hit the inside of the windshield. In the meantime, you are out there scraping the windshield because you don't want to try to turn the wipers on either. If the wipers are embedded in a thin coat of ice, all you're going to do is hurt or possibly break either the wiper arms, the blades, the linkages, the motor. You don't want to do any damage to that stuff because it wasn't made to fight itself out of ice. It was made to, you turn it on and it's got nothing but water in its way. So these are things that can cost money. Try to be careful if you experience any of them.
Bottom line, just be careful. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.